welcome to the Monday, or should we call today the St. Patrick's Day Eve edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Looking out the window right now, it doesn't look too bad outside, but it looks like we've got some rain in the forecast. In fact, a rainfall warning in effect for HRM and for most of the province today as another early spring storm makes its way here. As I understand it, anywhere from 30 to 50 millimeters of rain expected to fall here between this afternoon and tomorrow afternoon, with the ground being frozen after that visit from winter this past weekend, and some of the catch basins perhaps being a little bit blocked because of that. There is some concern out there for perhaps some localized flooding as a result. Anyway, we will reach out to our meteorologist, Allister Aalders, will be joining us in the third hour of the program today to give us the very latest on this latest go-around with Mother Nature. March break for many this week. I can sure tell you that, the highway and the drive-in this morning was certainly telling the world that a lot of people are taking this week off and spending some time with their children and with their families, and maybe are doing some traveling because it was pretty quiet on the roads out there this morning, at least during my commute. And if you're on March break, I'm jealous. And enjoy. There are some post-secondary students that are not going to be in class today as well at a number of different institutions across Nova Scotia. They're taking part in the first Nova Scotia student strike. A bunch of universities are getting together to raise some awareness around some issues, and they're out today. So if you see some kids out there, shouldn't say kids, university students out there, they're all kids to me. And they're not in class. That's probably why. I mentioned St. Patrick's Day is tomorrow. Get your green beer ready. There will be a flag raising at City Hall at noon. The Irish Society will be there. It's to mark not only St. Patrick's Day but Irish Heritage Month, and it's all. I think that, and maybe we've got two councillors in the studio. Maybe we can work on this. I know they don't have anything on their agenda these days, so maybe we can designate a St. Patrick's Day as a citywide holiday, and or maybe not necessarily St. Patrick's Day, but how about the day after St. Patrick's Day? Because there's usually a lot of bleary-eyed people that have been out visiting perhaps some of the local flavor, as I shall call it. We open up pubs early and such for St. Patrick's Day, and it tends to be a well-attended event. Councillor Austin, you agree with me?
It's an interesting idea. My father-in-law is a direct immigrant from Belfast, so I'm sure it would have family support in my household.
There you go. And that is, of course, Councillor Sam Austin, who is here for Councillors on the Hot Seat. In the other corner today is all the way in from Bedford. All the way in from Bedford. And that's Councillor Jean St. Amand. Jean, how are you?
Good.
Do we need the day off on the day after St. Patrick's Day?
I mean, I think I'd probably get some family support for that as well.
Right.
I attended the Irish Society's dinner on Friday night, and then after I had a conversation with my mother, found out that I've got a bunch of Irish descendants on my grandmother's side. So
that's a trademark name, but
no, yeah.
I'm just saying. Anyway, Councillors on the Hot Seat is underway, as a matter of fact. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255 if you want to ask a question of our councillors. Here's an opportunity. Again, 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. I'll start with the broad question on the budget, and I'll start with you, Councillor St. Amand. We're through the process-ish now. Where are we at with the budget, and were you surprised how much reaction you're getting this time around from constituents?
Certainly not surprised. I mean, I think residents are reasonably well engaged in what's going on. We all have a vested interest in what the municipality winds up ultimately deciding for the budget. And it affects the services that we receive on a very daily basis. We're all well aware of what we get from our tax dollars. So I was encouraged to hear from quite a number of residents on every side of the issue and pointing out what the impact would be to their respective families.
Councillor Austin, you're a wily veteran at these things now. I guess your thoughts on this go around and the reaction. It's been, from my perspective, it's I've seen a lot of engagement in this budget.
Yeah. Wily veteran, as long as my schemes are a little more successful than the coyotes, right? So, this has probably been the budget that took the longest to deliver. Our deliberations, I don't think, ever finished on time because there was just so much we were looking at. And there was probably more feedback in this one than in any other one that I've been part of as well. And I think that goes to the stakes being so high, whether you were on the side of feeling the pinch in your household because of all sorts of rising costs and looking at a tax increase as well as yet another kind of burden to bear, or whether you were someone who was looking at it and saying, hey, I want to live in a city that is livable and you guys are growing so much and your services aren't keeping up. And so we certainly heard from both sides of the argument around these services are important versus, my tax bill is already high.
So we're done the pencil sharpening on this as I understand, right?
Yeah, so we're at this stage. Council's been through in painstaking detail all the departments. We've moved all our motions. We've had all our debates and arguments, and now staff have gone away to produce the final budget. Typically, when they come back, it is just for ratification because council's already given direction and made the decision. All of these, but there's. Ratification is normally a formality, but this budget has had so many twists and turns, I wouldn't be surprised if there still might be more debate to be had.
Do we know what the final number is as regards to rate increase?
Yeah, so, where we landed, I think it was 9.5. And
on the municipal side.
On the municipal side.
Overall.
7.5 overall, yeah, once you include the provincial portion that is in there. On the municipal side, it was 9.5, and we had it down to 7.5. But then we went back up because we decided that we were going to make some investment in transit, in the transit plan, which there's not on any issue around council. There's always different points of view. There's one thing that I think has become very clear that we all agree on, which is the need for an effective transit system in this city, and that was something council is willing to put money into.
Councillor St. Amand, can you explain the difference between those two numbers, the 9.5 and the 7.5, just for clarity?
It's how it's broken down in terms of how. Remember that the tax bill actually has a multitude of different line items that are included on it. And so the specific piece that we were focusing on is everything that goes into the services that are delivered, and that's entirely built within one line item within that tax bill. And so the other pieces wind up having a relationship to that number, but it winds up meaning that the provincial piece and some of the other pieces wind up collectively meaning for a smaller percentage of the overall increase.
So do we know what the average increase is going to be at this point?
Do you recall off the top of your head? I feel like this is a $200-some-odd thing.
Yeah, I just don't remember exactly where it landed because it always uses the average tax bill. And it's hard for residents to really reconcile what the average tax bill means for them because not everybody is the average tax bill. So, what we try to do is ask people to look at what their actual dollar figure is, what their assessment is, and they can quite quickly calculate it based on the numbers that are presented as part of this final budget being delivered.
So and to look at your capped assessment value, not just your assessment, because that's what you're paying
Big
off
difference.
of, and that's
correct.
What we calculate based on.
So if I was to say that the HRM tax rate for 2026 is going up by 9.5%, would I be accurate?
Yes.
The tax bill, not the tax rate.
Okay, the tax bill.
So combination of assessment and tax rate.
So it's 9.5%.
And we don't have our final budget yet for the actual rates. There would be a change in the rate. I'm just not sure off the top of my head what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a changing. Virtually every meeting, we wind up getting a little bit of an update from our finance team on what the impact has been of the changes that we've made, either during that day or in the prior day. So following the bouncing ball to figure out exactly what the last impact was, that's what we're waiting for our financial team to be able to tell us.
So let me ask you this question, then I'll start with you, Councillor St. Amand. Disappointed that you were unable to get to the numbers, the lower numbers, as opposed to the 11.2 or 11.5 or whatever the mayor was telling us this thing was going to go up by?
Well, grand scheme of things, yes. I mean, we're always looking to provide for as much affordability as we can for residents, but I think the investments that we wound up making in transit and in public safety on our roadways are the types of things that I think residents will respect our attempt to spend a little bit of money on in order to affect real change that they will see every day on our roads. Congestion and road safety remain at the very top of what residents' priorities are. And so the fact that while we started whittling down, we looked at opportunities to beef up some of these specific areas in the form of investments in more buses in order to create more capacity within the transit system and investing more money in public safety on our roadways. Those are strategic investments that will pay off in the long term. Residents just have to be patient because it takes a little while for those types of investments to start to pay off. How
about you, Councillor Austin?
It's honestly pretty much where I thought. We actually had done better than I thought we were going to. I was thinking 8 something is probably where this will land. Council had it down to 7.5 because we basically did a bunch of cuts. We took every user fee increase that was on offer that staff had brought forward, and that includes things from, transit fares going up, but also if you want a zoning confirmation letter from the city, that's going to cost more. So we hit every user fee. We made some cuts. We had it down to 7.5, but then decided, you know what? To Councillor St. Amand's point, investing in transit and road safety is important, and so then that put it back up to 9.5.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. That is the number. If you have a question for our councillors, here's an opportunity for you to do so. A couple of the more talked about issues that came to light during the budget discussion, at least from my perspective. Obviously, down the street here, the Halifax Forum and the mayor's motion that was defeated on a tie vote to delay this thing. I'll start with you, Councillor Austin. Your thoughts on what we should do with the Halifax Forum and its $28 million reconstruction project?
Yeah, and reconstruction is probably the best description. I mean, the forum has not been council's finest moment going back quite a ways because we've been kicking this can now for a while. The building has gotten to the point that it's becoming a have-to project, right? And I say have to because the forum is not something new. This is about preserving the services we already have: 2 ice surfaces, community space, that arena function. We can't just let the thing fall over. We have to be serious about, what comes next. And I was disappointed in the mayor's motion because he brought it forward, but there wasn't any, Councillor Cleary and I both asked, well, if you know something, if you have some new information here, bring it. And he didn't. He didn't have anything to offer as to okay, well, what if we're not doing this, then what? Because the cost of not doing this would be about $16 million. That would be in the form of the walking away from $2.5 million that we've already spent on the design contract. It would be $4 million in terms of what staff estimate we would pay in additional inflation, because nothing gets cheaper with time. And $10 million that we'd have to spend on the building just to kind of keep it going for the extra additional time before we get to the point that we can retire it. So the mayor was asking us to spend $16 million with not really any information as to what the alternative would be. And so I couldn't support that. I was kind of surprised it ended up being as close a vote as it was, given the lack of detail. And we'd just been through a budget where we sweated every detail, even down to having a debate over an $8,000 cut to Engage Nova Scotia. I was really surprised that we were in a spot with where we almost went with the mayor's motion on this, where it was $16 million that, in my opinion, seemed to be being rolled out into the Grand Parade at City Hall and burned.
Let me ask you this question before I come to you, Councillor St. Amand. The mayor's theory is that we can build a 2-pad somewhere else far cheaper than we can to rebuild that footprint that is the Halifax Forum. Do you buy that part of the theory?
No, because we're coming to the point where the peninsula is about to be back to where it was historically. You're talking, somewhere between 70 and 100,000 people on the peninsula. They need ice, right? You can't just put all the growth in a place and not provide the community supports to go along with it. And, the forum does that in spades. It's not just a hockey rink. It is an arena. It is 2 ice surfaces. It is a community multi-purpose space. It is will be an outdoor indoor park. There's a lot going on in this project. And, the constant comparison of like, well, Dell built their arena or their new rink for $50 million. It was one ice surface, and it doesn't have all those other components. This is what stuff costs.
Councillor St. Amand?
Like my counterpart here, I too was I was torn on this one. I mean, the reality is we are in a position where our capital budget is having tremendous impact on our operational budget in subsequent years. We have a lot of major projects that are on the table right now, some of which we have built into the budget, and some are just in the offing, and we haven't yet managed to find a suitable place to even begin to sort them into the budget. And so this was a big ticket item that I felt the scope needed to be re-examined, so I reluctantly supported the mayor's motion, not because I wanted to see a pause necessarily, but because I wanted to register my displeasure with the fact that the scope of this particular project seems out of whack with where we need to be from a financial perspective on our long-term strategic projects. The reality is I think we're going to have opportunities to look at the scope of the project regardless, because we've got a report coming back to council in April that will provide us with the 50% design on this particular project. But some of the things that I noted, it wasn't just the budget, it was the fact that our capacity within the completely newly built stadium or the rink is not the same as what it is right now. So in addition to the price tag going up, the value proposition changed a little bit based on the scope of the project. So I'm hoping that in working with the forum board that we'll be able to get to a place where the scope feels appropriate and we'll be able to move ahead.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're going to take our first break. Councillors on the Hot Seat continues on the other side. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back. Before we get to the phones, I'm going to dive into the email bag here very quickly. Lots of people wanting to ask questions of our councillors today, who, of course, is Councillor St. Amand, Councillor Austin, and they're here in the studio to answer your questions. So if you want to shoot us an email, or even better, give us a call, 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Councillor Austin, you and I were talking about this story before we came on the air this morning, and that is the saga that is the building that's too big in your part of the world, yeah. Right? I guess let's start on the genesis of this whole thing. How is it possible, given that the city gives permits and there should be inspections and those kind of things, that a contractor can get to the point where they've added 2 stories to a building and not really get caught until the end?
So this one has been it's definitely been unusual. You have to go back to the 90s to find any kind of comparable situation. So it's been 25, 26 years since we've had something like this in HRM. What happened here is the building was already under construction. And as part of the changes we made to our zoning bylaws, as part of trying to address the housing crisis, as part of the housing accelerator program with the federal government, we have provided a lot of additional density all over the place, and this property was one of the places that we did grant additional density. And so the owners, they looked at that and said, "Great, we can add 2 more floors and still be within the footprint that we're allowed density-wise, but we can do 2 more floors." What they missed was that as you go taller, generally our design requirements require your building to get slimmer. So that's made to lessen impacts around wind, shadow, on neighbors, on streets. And so they missed that part in their application. They fired off a permit to us, but because they were already under construction, they didn't wait for that permit to come back. They just assumed it would be yes, but because they had fundamentally misread the bylaw, we ended up in the situation that we have now, which is they built 2 extra floors in that month that shouldn't have been there.
I've spent time on construction sites, albeit it wasn't 5 minutes ago in my younger days. I remember inspectors being like a permanent fixture at particularly new construction of big building sites. How is it that they actually got these 2 floors on without an inspector saying, hey, wait a minute, your permit doesn't say that?
Well, they come by. I mean, there's not an inspector on site every day,
Understood.
right? Like they come by at set touch points, and this literally played out basically over a month.
Right. So now they have to take those 2 floors off?
Yeah, that's what council has voted to do, right? We denied the initiation of a planning process to consider allowing the 2 floors to stay. So yeah, they're in the situation now where what they've built does not conform with the land use bylaw, and there's a court process that will proceed, and they will not get an occupancy permit unless they can make their building agree with the plan, right? Which means tearing off those 2 floors.
So the permit, the secondary permit, the one that they issued and just started without, is that off the table now, or can it come back once they take? Do they have to? You know what I'm saying? Like, are they going to maybe push the fact for that permit that they'd already put into the city that they'd started without, so that they don't have to do that, or is this a done deal? So,
I mean, the only way to legalize what's there would be for HRM to change the rules, which is what council voted not to do on Tuesday. So they have to make their building now fit the land use bylaw.
Expensive.
It is, and you know what? There was a lot of folks that have contacted me on this saying, oh, well, look at these slimy developers who are just wanting, they just kept going and as a way to get extra floors. I've met with them. You can say a lot about this. There's certainly a misreading of the bylaw. Incredibly poor judgment to have proceeded building without a valid permit, and this is the cost of doing so. But this wasn't a malevolence. They assumed that they were in conformance with the land use bylaw.
And very quickly,
I believe them in that.
While we're talking about new construction approvals for a fairly large development being built now by Joe Ramey at the site of the parking lot-ish of Micmac Mall.
Yeah, lots of change coming to Micmac Mall.
Some concern from residents, though, that it's a little too big for its britches. Yeah,
I mean, one of the things we did in the center plan was we tried to be very clear about where we want development to go and what sort of scale we want things at. And Micmac Mall was identified as a growth node, a place that can accommodate a lot more additional people because already have services, have transit already, a transit terminal already on site. And in terms of environmental damage, you're talking about taking asphalt parking lots and turning them into housing. So it hits all the markers for a spot that we want more intensification at. I get for folks that, you look at it and it's like, oh man, is the scale of this is it really going to fit? And it will change the community. It will have additional
40
people.
40 stories on one of those buildings.
Oh
right?
yeah, it's going to be significant. I would suggest that probably we had the same sort of conversations back in the day when Can Euro started building the towers at Micmac Mall in the first place. Right. This will play out over a long period of time, and there's also benefits to the community that come from that. Besides the obvious of getting growth in the right location where people can use alternatives to car travel like transit, like active transportation. As part of this project, there's a public park that will go into the site, and we'll actually join together some of our missing AT connections in that area, including up Micmac Boulevard towards Lancaster. So I think, the biggest one that I look at that's an unknown, I mean, for the municipality, we do have a lot of public space around here. There's Shuby Park, there's Lake Beanook, there's the Maybank Field, there's the courts at Creighton Park Elementary. The one big piece, and we're not able to consider it at council, the one big question I have over the whole thing is what the heck we're going to do about schools in Dartmouth. Because you look at Micmac Mall, you look at Dartmouth Common getting residential, you look at Shannon Park. Either some of our existing schools are going to have to get a lot bigger, or Dartmouth's going to need another one up there.
How about traffic in that area, Sam? Having people that go to Micmac Mall and want to come back to Halifax know that you kind of got to go down a street, and then there's a stop sign a residential neighborhood to get onto the ramp. Is there any changes coming to the traffic flow as a result of this development?
Yeah, so I mean, we will get a new transit terminal out of this. So the existing Micmac terminal will get rebuilt, redesigned. So there is great potential for transit improvement, which is what we need. We need more people to choose alternatives. There will be active transportation connections intersections along Micmac Boulevard is part of this. So hopefully that will mean that folks who want to ride a bike or walk to get to their destinations, they can do that. There will be some vehicle increase as well out of this. We did engage with the province on this because you're right there on the highway, right? What this means from the circ, and the province didn't have any concerns about the additional traffic impact that would cause. And, ultimately, I think when it comes to development, people often focus on what's near at hand. So you look and you say, oh, well, they're dropping, 4,000 units at Micmac Mall. Traffic is going to be horrendous. We know from StatsCan data about how people live and operate that a lot of the trips there will use alternatives because there are alternatives in place. If we accommodate that same level of growth out in Cole Harbour, you might actually end up with more impacts on things like the circ, because out in Cole Harbour, 95% of all trips will be by car, just by the nature of the community. So it's really important to get growth in the right places. That's how you minimize traffic.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're going to stop. We're going to take a break, and then to the phones. You're listening to Councillors on the Hot Seats. We're back in minutes. All right, welcome back. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. In the studio with us today, two councillors. Councillor Sam Austin and Councillor Jean St. Amand are here to answer your questions. There's several lines open, folks, if you want to get into the show. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. We begin with Gary. Gary, how are you?
Good. Sam, down by the downtown Dartmouth there, the ferry terminal, the wharf down there is in bad shape. That can get fixed this year?
So it was in the budget last year. It ended up being just design work, though. We weren't able to do that. But this year, if you're talking the area right in front of the dock there, that's all going to be fixed this season.
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, it's in bad shape. I've talked to staff about it, and that's in our budget for the coming year.
Yeah, because I seen the bad shape. I said, geez, did anybody ever break their leg or anything? Because it's bad. It's getting bad there. I was there down there the weekend. It's in bad shape.
It is, and that's going to be done.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate it. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Next in line here is Ian. Ian, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Dan. How are you?
I'm well. Your question for our councillors, please.
I have some questions with respect to the increase in the taxes, and it goes to the focus of my question is with respect to the assessments that are taxable assessments and cap and so on. I believe the number that Councillor clearly suggested we need to get to a flat tax rate was $40 million in his motion made some weeks ago. And yet when we first started on the proposal back in December, the number that we needed was close to $70 million. I suspect that is from an unexpected increase in the assessments. Am I correct in that? And was there a report issued by the provincial company that does the assessments?
Yeah, so we've received our assessment data. We got that, I think it was in January.
Yeah.
And so the two numbers you're seeing, so when we talk about the 9.5% that we landed on for the municipal portion, that's made up of two things. It's made up of the assessment gains and, of course, what the tax rate is. And so there's a portion of that that's assessment, and there's a portion of that comes from the increased rate. And so the $40 million that you're referencing in terms of Councillor Clary's, that would get the tax bill amount down to like a 5 approximately, and then that would just be the assessment lift that's in it. We're at 9.5, so there's a component that's a tax rate increase, and there's a component that's assessment.
That's right. So I understand all that, Sam. But my question was, first of all, was there a report issued by the provincial corporation where I could answer that question myself? I know for a fact already that the amount in the assessment was more than the staff anticipated, and I just want to track it.
Yeah, so
was there a report?
We get, they come in and they present to us. I'm not sure off the top of my head how much of that was written down in terms of a report to us, but the PVSC was here. John, do you remember?
Well, certainly we have the presentation slides that would have provided, at the very least, the top-end figures across residential and commercial. But don't recall if there was a component report.
Oh, that's interesting. So you
elaborated
don't think
on
there was some slide, but not a report as far as you guys remember.
I mean, they pretty much come and they just give us the numbers, right? I mean, the assessment numbers are what the assessment numbers are. There's not really a whole lot of more details than that.
Because it's a provincial level report, too. So, they very likely have a copy of their most recent assessment roll on their website. And we would have just seen the slides that they were using to present to HRM.
All right. So, I think most people, just let me finish off with this comment. It's like a comment. I think you should provide us. Most people have their bills capped, and so their increase with the cap, I think, was 2.6 or 2.9. I forget. So I'd like to know how much my taxes as a capped taxpayer are going up, and I think you should have that in. I think that should be provided rather than this average bill that's going up. I think most people want to know because it's not 9%. It's going to be somewhere, and that's why I think it's in the range of 7 to 7.5%. And I think you guys should have that number at the tip of your fingers.
All right, Ian, appreciate it. Councillor Austin, is it safe to say that the 7.5%, the provincial portion we were talking about at the top of the show, is that the increase in assessment?
So the overall amount, so what you see on your tax bill is that 7.5. That's how much your bill is going to move when you put everything in there. Okay. And that's based on the average assessment, and it is the average capped assessment. So the problem with the average is, right? So if you've recently bought a home and you're not capped and your assessment's based on $600,000, well, your tax, I wasn't, but I know that issue. So if you've recently bought a home, your assessment is nowhere close to the average, right?
It's very interesting how almost offended people get when I start talking about how tax fairness when it comes to that cap. Would there ever be any kind of appetite? And I know it's probably that's part of the province, but it feels to me that because we have an artificially deflated or an artificially low amount of taxes coming in because of that cap, some people are paying full, some are paying their 2% or whatever the CPI is. Is there, or would there be a loss of revenue because of that cap? Or do you think if everybody was paying, if the cap was gone, that the tax rate, because we would see more revenue, the tax rate would be down?
Well, you're asking exactly the right question. That's the reason that Council passed a motion, 2-3 months ago now. Councillor Steele had brought forward a motion to ask for a staff report to lay out the consequences of the cap from the municipal perspective. Not to remove it or anything like that, which is how it was misinterpreted by some residents. It's to understand. I mean, you can't fix something that you don't measure. And so we wanted to understand what is the impact of the tax cap on the way that the municipality raises its revenue. And so having a broader look at that, having that report come back, will give us something to start having a conversation about. But you're right, it does fall to the province. It's entirely within their jurisdiction to undertake a broader tax reform that will provide for a degree of equity and a degree of connectedness to the residents' ability to pay, rather than have it be this regressive tax that winds up hitting those that have bought most recently.
Councillor Austin?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the Federation of Municipalities has done a lot of work on this over the years. The cap is fundamentally, I think, I'll give you an example. A personal one. So I bought my home in 2010 for $259,000. And so I've been there 16 years now. My neighbor across the street, same 1870s wooden box home that you see everywhere in old Halifax and Dartmouth. They bought their place in 2023. They paid $925 because the assessments have gone through the roof. I am paying $2,000 less in taxes than my neighbor across the street.
Who's capped now, right?
Who's capped now, except here's the thing. So this is my poor neighbor who's paying way more than me, even like he's got young kids. He's a working guy. This isn't a situation of, oh, well, it's all right because we got a senior on a fixed income. Like, we're both working people with families, and I'm receiving the same services, living in the same neighborhood, and I have a much, much less of a tax burden than him. And it's hard for me to see that and say, yeah, that makes sense. That's fair. The problem for him, and he okayed me sharing these things, in 2023, he bought his house, and now he's capped. And so when he looks at his bill, he's like, well, at least I've got a little bit of cap here, so I'm saving something. He's not, because the cap means our tax rate is higher. So he's still underwater. He just doesn't see it as clearly, right? Because we have a higher tax rate because of the cap.
And I don't want to take a lot of time on this, but in theory, if the cap was gone and
tax rates would go down.
Yeah, like you guys would have more revenue coming in, right? Wouldn't that's
for us, it's revenue neutral. Honestly, it's just about how the revenue is distributed, right? Right now, we have a situation where if you're someone who's like in the military, for example, has to move frequently, if you're someone who's had to move for whatever reason, if you're a senior that's looking to downsize, if you're a newcomer, if you're a renter because apartments aren't capped, if you are paying more, and if you're paying more, it's because someone else is paying less. And so right now, rather than distributing things based on assessment, we distribute based on the cap, and as a result, well, there's a lot of unfairness and inequity built into that.
902-405-6001, 877-801-8255. Tell you what, we're going to take a break. We'll get back to the phones after these messages. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand, back in the bed. All right, welcome back. 902-405-6001, 877-801-8255. To the phones, we say hello to Chris. Chris, how are you?
Not too bad. Yourself, Dan?
Well, your question for our councillors, please.
Yes, with the budget and spending money, wasting money, poor planning, I'm wondering if either one of you can speak to the roundabout proposed for Ross Road and Lake Major. Why move Ross Road to Lake Major where there's already a set of lights, but then rip all that out and put a big roundabout in? That just does not make sense to me.
I know that this question has been asked before. I'm not terribly familiar with that spot, but I do recall Councillor Hensby speaking to the fact that it was connected to the realignment that's underway on Ross Road itself.
Yes. But like on the Facebook groups, everyone that's out here, everybody that's commenting says, no, it's not a good idea. The other thing is if you're not familiar with the area, it is bumper to bumper on the highway going into town in the morning and bumper to bumper coming back. And the rule for a roundabout is if somebody's in there, you can't enter. Right. So how are people from Lake Major or Ross Road ever going to enter it during rush hour? Like, it just seems like a waste of money, a lot of construction delay. They're moving Ross Road anyway. Why not just leave the lights and boom, it's done?
So one thing I can offer, like John, I'm not terribly familiar with this one. I mean, I know the spot well because my parents are out on the Eastern Shore, but you know, I haven't followed this project specifically in the way the area councillors would have. But I have a similar sort of situation where I have at Lancaster, Woodland, and Micmac Boulevard, where you have highway that then dumps into City Street, and at all those locations, you always end up dealing with speed issues because people are coming off the highway and not necessarily adjusting their speeds to reflect it. And that's in part because you don't have a good signal that, okay, your driving should now change because now you've entered into a different environment. The one thing, if you terminate a highway in a roundabout at that transition point, you very much correct your speed issue because you hit that, and whether the light is green or the light is red, it doesn't matter anymore. You've arrived at a roundabout, and this is now sending a very clear signal. Take your foot off the gas. You're not on the highway anymore. Drive like you're in the city.
Yeah, no, and we've rallied David Hensby, and he had the RCMP do quite a few sweeps down I forget what road it is, but Ruggles is on it, because they have reduced that to a 60 zone coming off the highway going up towards Lake Major, and the public asked for that, and they've been doing that, and they've caught a lot of people. So, you know, the speeding has actually been addressed. So I don't think that's so much of a problem, but people are all up in arms out here about it. I realize you guys aren't the councillors that but you're the ones that are on today, so you're in the hot.
Yeah, we're the reachable, grabbable ones right now. I do.
Yeah,
I mean, my sense. I mean, David's been my parents' counselor for as long as I can remember. I've never had a problem reaching out to him. I'd suggest just giving David a call, and you could probably have a conversation with him about it.
David's texting me now to say that the traffic lights would have to be reconfigured for the intersection because the lights themselves do not eliminate speed.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. All the best with that. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Dan. Good morning, councillors. Thank you for taking my call.
Morning.
Sure.
I had other questions that I wanted to ask you. But you mentioned Metro Transit, and when anybody mentions Metro Transit does not work here. It needs to be redone from the top to the well, maybe not. The drivers are fine, but there's buses that don't show up, and you want more people on transit. Well, I get on the bus at 6:00 in the morning at Lacewood to go to Dartmouth. I'm very fortunate. It takes me about 45 minutes each way because my wife takes the car, so I'm fortunate. But the bus I get on at Lacewood is packed, jammed. The bus driver is saying no more, and yet a Slinky bus will go by with 12 people on it. And it's not a question of where this bus can go or where this bus can't go, because I know it can go because I'm a truck driver with a Class 1 license, and I've driven downtown for 20 years. So I know what can fit where and what can't. But Metro Transit is in shams. The easy routes, Lacewood to Spryfield, a route right down Dunbrack, boom. You have to take 3 buses to get to Spryfield, which will take you 2 hours. I've done it. It takes you 2 hours, and I live in Kearney Lake, so I can get to Lacewood pretty quick. But then I got to go to Lacewood, to Halifax Shopping Centre, jump on a bus at Halifax Shopping Centre to take it out to Spryfield, and then reverse everything. It takes 3.5 to 4 hours. But it's the Metro Transit is not working around here. It needs a complete rehaul of the management, because I don't know if they ride the buses at all, but you go talk to some passengers and they're not very happy. You look at the Facebook group, the chat, HRM Transit chat, and it's never really any good experiences. And, how do they service? They're building out in Hammond's Plains. There's a new building going up every other month that has 200-300 units of it. And then councillors say, well, we want more people to take transit and get less cars off the road. Well, that didn't happen because the bus services out there are inadequate.
All right, Anthony, let's let the councillors answer your question. I appreciate it. I'll start with you, Sam.
Sure. I wasn't sure. I guess Anthony's gone. If his buses that he was talking about, some of the improvements that are coming in this budget are actually routes that I think would affect him, because the additional buses we're buying are to improve capacity and reliability on like the Crosstown, the Spryfield bus, because those are ones that he's not wrong in noting that there's problems with overloading. The Councillor Cuddle's been very vocal on this, that the Spryfield bus is one of the worst in the system right now for overloads. So there's some immediate relief coming. To Anthony's kind of bigger kind of issue, I mean, there's 2 things that I would offer. One is the transit system is suffering from all the same problems that the vehicle drivers are suffering from, which is congestion. The city is getting worse, and the buses are getting hung up in traffic, and the bus hung up in traffic is then missing its stops because it can't get there on time. So one of the things we really need to figure out is how to get the buses out of that traffic and through those choke points more efficiently. And then the second piece I would offer is that there's a making sure, like we talked about Micmac Mall earlier, about making sure we get growth and development in the right locations, because transit can't be everything to everybody. To run buses in areas where you're just not going to pick up many riders is just not something we can do with the limited resources we have. We have to focus. We have to focus where the ridership is, and so those would be the two things I think that we'd consider. Hopefully, some of the investment that's coming as part of this budget will be helpful to Anthony on his travels there.
Yeah, well, and another thing that I think will probably help quite a bit is we do have a new transit director who has been actively taking the bus, and so he is seeing things at the ground level. He's able to see what kind of capacity issues we have on key routes, and of course his team is doing ongoing analysis. So as Councillor Austin pointed out, making adjustments in order to ensure that routes that are over capacity are addressed, routes that are under capacity wind up being redirected and re-resourced elsewhere. Plus, we've got new routes that are proposed as part of Halifax Transit's core service plan. That will wind up taking pressure off some other routes because quite a number of our routes overlap in certain spots. And a lot of that will have to do with what the point of origin is and what the destination is. So as an example, one of the new routes that's proposed from the West Bedford area into the Bayers Lake area, an entirely new route that services an audience that has a hard time being able to access transit in the first place, other than to take several other routes and use transfers to be able to get to their final destination. This will provide them with a direct conduit that will wind up taking some pressure off the 90 and a couple of other routes that travel along the Bedford Highway and then ultimately go up Chain Lake Drive. So it does take a little bit of time for us to move some of those resources around, but one of the things that we wound up doing as part of this budget process was receive a presentation from Halifax Transit that identified some of the routes that they felt needed to be adjusted because they were underutilized, underperforming, and then they identified new routes or changes to existing routes that would help better move people around. And so it takes a little bit of measurement and analysis in order to make that happen, and investments like we've made in this year's budget for some additional buses will wind up helping move the needle.
10,
as well.
right? I think that was
10 new buses in this coming year, yes.
That's going to do it, folks. We're out of time. I appreciate everyone who picked up the phones and dialed the numbers. For those of you I left on hold, my apologies to you. We'll do Councillors on the Hot Seat again next week from 10 until 11 o'clock. Councillor Sam Austin, I appreciate your time.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you.
Same with you, Councillor Jean St. Amand.
Always a pleasure to be here, Dan.
We're going to stop and take a break. When we come back, open hour on the other side. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. Back in minutes. Welcome back. It's the first open hour of the week. The telephone lines, folks, are open. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Awful lot of things happening in the last 48 hours or so that I'm sure that you may want to talk about. But, of course, the regular rules apply here on the program. Bring whatever it is that's on your mind to the show. We'll have a listen and certainly have a discussion about it. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Well, if you were listening over the last hour-long segment, you know that HRM Council has now done all of the paperwork, the budget deliberations, the listening of presentations, the bantering back and forth over issues, and have now put a budget to HRM Council that will be put into a big document and then will be subject to ratification. I do believe that ratification vote usually happens somewhere around the end of March. I think it might be the 31st, but don't quote me on that one. And included in it, and you heard it here from both of our councillors in the last hour, included in it is an increase in the tax bill of 9.5%. Now, that number is going to change based on caps and assessments and those kind of things, but the tax increase on the bill, 9.5%. So if you trace this all the way back to the beginning, and when we first started talking about this budget, which feels like it was just like about a century ago, that number started off at 10.5%. So we lost a percentage point, but still a significant increase in the budget. Councillor Austin telling us that council had it lower, but decided during their budget deliberations last week that they were going to make an investment, I think the word was, in transit, and that raised the tax bill price by 2 percentage points. That's 10 buses and some redevelopment there. So now we know. Obviously, still not a done deal until it's actually ratified by council, but now we know what the tax increase is going to be. I'm wondering what your thoughts are and how big of an impact that's going to have on your life, your family's budget, as we look at a rather significant increase in taxation here in HRM. That's one of the topics, of course, that will be up for discussion. We touched on the Halifax Forum. We've heard a number of different views on the forum here as of late. Some, like Councillor Austin, were supportive, shall I say, in the reconstruction project. I'm not calling it a redevelopment anymore. It's knock it down to the baseboards, to the footprint, and rebuild a completely new building on its current site at $126 or $128 million. Councillor St. Amand said that he reluctantly supported the mayor's motion to delay this thing to take a closer look. Councillor Austin, in his comments on it, saying that HRM is now getting back to its traditional population levels on the peninsula, and people need ice, is what he said. Your thoughts on that as well, or whatever it is on your mind. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. I just got this in from HRM literally a couple of moments ago, and it reads, the Halifax Regional Municipality is advising residents that the shared micro-mobility pilot program of offering e-scooters and e-bikes through Bird Canada will resume service later today. During the winter months, snow is plowed onto surfaces that are also used for parking, e-scooters and e-bikes. As a result, the municipality receives a heavy snowfall. Shared devices may be temporarily available to allow space for snow clearing operations along municipal streets, bike lanes, and sidewalks. Availability will resume as soon as conditions permit. The pilot provides residents with low-emission transportation options that support short-distance travel and help to reduce traffic congestion. E-scooters and e-bikes will be available at designated parking locations throughout the municipality. Riders can find, unlock, and pay for the devices through the Bird Canada mobile app. Residents are reminded of key guidelines to support safe and responsible use. Devices will be parked in designated areas and not block sidewalks, transit stops, access points, and private property. Riders must follow all applicable traffic rules and municipal regulations. E-scooters are intended for use on roads, bike lanes, and multi-use pathways unless otherwise signed, and only one rider is permitted per device. So I know we've had discussions about e-scooters here for several weeks on the show, and I do believe that this is year 2 of a 2-year pilot project. Last year we had our first year with it, and this is the second year of this pilot project with Bird Mobility. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. I wanted to also share something else with you today that caught my attention over the weekend, and that was some comments made south of the border as the war continues to roll on in Iran. Just reading some of the daily updates that we're getting from that area of the world now. More strikes in Tehran, more strikes in Lebanon today. A number of the Gulf states have also reported either having to use their defense systems, their missile defense systems, or in the case, and I think it was Abu Dhabi. I might be mistaken on that, but it was Doha that was reporting a drone strike at an airport. And the good news that I heard on the weekend is that we've seen our first transit of an oil vessel through the Strait of Hormuz. A Pakistani flagged oil carrier made its way through and managed to get through the strait and on about its business. But that is still very sparsely happening. It's not happening very often. But the good news is that at least one carrier made it through. President of the United States putting out a call yesterday or the weekend, I should say, to allies to send their navies to help open the Strait of Hormuz, which was an interesting development in my opinion. I'm interested in what you think about that. Should the world get together and use its military might to allow the shipments of oil to transit that, and other goods, obviously fertilizer is a big deal too, to transit that Strait of Hormuz. But the other comment that caught my attention didn't come from the White House. And it didn't come from President Trump. It came from the chairman of the FCC. That's the Federal Communications Commission south of the border. Its chair is named Brendan Carr, who, along with the President of the United States, has been taking exception to the coverage that has been unfolding here, the news coverage of the war in Iran. And has gone as far as to say that broadcasters better be careful when they're reporting on this. I'm paraphrasing. I have the quote here, and I'll read it in a minute. Better be careful when in their coverage of the war because their licenses are coming up for renewal. He says, and I quote, broadcasters that are running hoaxes and news distortions, also known as the fake news, now have a chance to correct course before their license renewals come up. The law is clear. Broadcasters must operate in the public interest and will lose their licenses if they don't. Now, he didn't. The Chair Carr didn't name any networks. But I think that we're heading towards a very slippery slope here. One of the freedoms that the United States is very proud of is freedom of the press. And I think that some of the headlines that the President of the United States has been reading don't sit well with him. And I think that he's and the FCC chairman are trying to perhaps, can I say, manipulate the news headlines? I would suspect that many of the networks will look at this and go, whatever. And some of the reporting I've read on it from American media and from international media around the world say that doesn't really have a whole lot to rely upon. But to me, it's just very scary that the President of the United States doesn't like the coverage that he's getting on the war in Iran. So now he's threatening to take licenses away. We've seen this before, not necessarily with broadcast licenses, but we've seen pressure put on 60 Minutes. We've seen pressure put on the networks to get rid of Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel, and the list goes on and on and on. I think we are in a very dangerous situation when it comes to this. And we all know that freedom of the press is a cornerstone of democracy. Do you agree with me? 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're back after the break. All right, welcome back. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. This is the open hour. Lines are open. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We say hello to Len. Len, are you there?
Yes, I'm here waiting for you.
Go ahead. You're on the air.
I wish I had been able to talk to the councillors because I'd like to ask them, when we voted the councillors in, we voted them in when they campaigned with all the promises they made about doing things. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times never happens. But the thing I wanted to ask them, how much money does it cost to change the name of a particular school or street? And now they're proposing to change the name of a street in Rockingham that's called Linwood Drive. And I would have to think that the same thing as changing the name of schools and changing the name of a street would cost, I don't know, maybe a couple of $1 million or maybe thousands of dollars. And why are we wasting money on changing the name of streets? Is that going to make my taxes better or not, or probably increase them? And I just don't know why these councillors vote on things or discuss things that are not important to anybody. I just don't understand that. Changing the name of a street, is that going to change the way I live my life on that street?
No, but
I don't
Len,
think so.
I think it's important to somebody because it was brought before council for for consideration. So somebody must be, wanting this to happen.
But what was the reason?
I don't know.
Can you answer that?
Nope.
No, but don't you think that's a waste of money with all the paperwork and all the things that have to be done to change the name of a street that is not really that? I have an aunt that lived on that street for over 70 years. That it was called. Why are they? And these people on that street right now, they're up in arms about them changing that name. So I'm just hoping that they change their mind and not waste taxpayers' money on changing the name that means nothing to you or anybody else. And have a good day.
Thanks, Len. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. I don't know what it costs to change a street name. I know there would be obviously signage that needs to change and would likely be a process. And whenever there's processes, there's money involved with it. I don't know if it's millions of dollars to change a street name, but there certainly would be a cost involved. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. That is the number. Let's go back to the phones and say hello to Kevin. Kevin, how are you?
How you doing, Dan?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
My ear caught your comment this morning about Trump threatening to revoke the licenses for the networks down the states.
Well, technically it was the FCC commission chair, but he's an appointment from Trump, so you can read into that how you like.
Well, this is... two thoughts run through my mind. Is this the future? Is the
scary
first
if it is, right?
And another point, I'm a history buff.
Mm-hmm.
I studied history a long time. And the first thing that came to my mind when you said that was, and I don't know if we can draw a direct comparison, but when Hitler and the Nazi Party came to power in Germany, one of the first things they did was they took control of the media.
Right, and it's happened in many, many, many places around the world, right?
You think about the power of the media, newspapers, radio, television, they control a large segment of the population. And you get someone that wants to take control and propagate what that means. It's a very powerful tool.
It certainly is.
And if we allow these things to happen, in the future you're going to live in a society that basically you're going to be censored. You're going to toe the party line. You're going to say what they tell you to say. You're going to think how they tell you to think.
Absolutely, Kevin. Absolutely.
There's quite an issue here. It's a serious issue, and I think it's more serious than people realize. Trump. He's the type to do it.
Well, he certainly has not ever been a fan of mainstream media. That's for sure, even in his first term, right?
You mentioned Jimmy Kimmel. You mentioned a couple of the talk show hosts.
Right. Right.
It's getting to the point you can't speak your mind anymore.
Kevin, I appreciate the call.
You take care.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Mark writes, freedom of the press is non-negotiable. However, here in Canada, the mainstream media is grossly left-leaning. When you see the coverage during elections, taxpayer-funded institutions like the CBC are far from unbiased. They paint conservatives in a bad light consistently. It needs to change. Mark, I will agree with you to a point. But that voice is there. Right? The same thing could be said with the National Post or some of the more right-leaning media outlets in the country, right? That will bend over backwards to try and take shots at the left or whatever. But at least, and I will always, until my last breath, defend their right to do so. If we get to a point where licenses are revoked because of what the president or the prime minister or the leader, the premier, whatever it is, think is not flattering to them, not cheerleading them. It's a scary situation to think about, isn't it? We see a controlled media right now on the other side of that war. Right? We see the state broadcaster in Iran constantly reporting the government line on things. And no contrary public press to counter it. I don't think, to our last caller's point, to Kevin's point, I don't think I think it's terrible. Please, don't get me wrong. I think this is absolutely terrible. But it's more difficult to control the narrative now if you're a leader of a country than it was in the past. right? Some of the things that that Kevin was talking about, we relied heavily on newspapers. We relied heavily on that 6 o'clock newscast. But the world gets its news from different places now. The world gets its news. The younger people get their news. Well, I guess I get my news, some of it, from alternative sources, right? Younger generations are getting their news from things like TikTok and from social media. And if you are a subscriber to said services, you know how sometimes those sources can be, what's the word I'm looking for? Suspect. And that's why I think there's a place for them. There's a place for those sites. There's also a place for mainstream media. We need checks and balances when it comes to this stuff, people. Inside information here, but newspapers and networks are designed to make money by selling advertising, and you sell advertising by the number of people who are listening, reading, or viewing. But as I said earlier, I will support until my very last breath their ability to do that. If you don't like what they're reporting, that's your own call. But to say, I don't like what you're doing from a leadership position and I'm taking your license away, that is anything but a free press. We're back after the news. Welcome back. This is the Open Hour, 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Just think about this for a minute, right? If licenses got threatened in Canada and say, I don't know, there was a talk show host in Halifax that was critical of something or a government decision that was made, then that would be gone and we would lose this kind of forum. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Hello, Dave.
Yes, Dan. I'd like to bring up the BBC incident where its documentary, I think it was the Panoramic documentary by Panoramic.
Yep.
And it was regarding Trump's speech, January 6th, that they virtually edited to fit their narrative. And it was so severe that the head bigwigs of the BBC, the CEO, had to step down.
A bunch of them. I think there was 7 people that stepped down as a result of that.
Many, yeah. And, of course, there's a huge lawsuit,
as they should have.
And there should be. So this is BBC. This is a big, one of the world's most
So you
watched.
should threaten the licenses of the BBC because of it so that they can't exist?
I go to BBC myself quite a bit, and CBC,
every day.
And Fox, and CNN. Mm-hmm. And CNN was also, with Kamala Harris, they edited her speech, or her interview, pardon me.
Are you sure you're not confusing 60 Minutes with that?
I believe it was CNN, but it could have been 60 Minutes. No, 60 Minutes is another. If it's 60 Minutes, it's just the same. We take 60 Minutes as a very reliable news source, right? I would think. But we used to. I'm not too sure if we do anymore.
But Dave, I hope I'm wrong, Dave. But you're not laying out a case that the FCC chairman's correct here.
I haven't really heard the story. I'm just hearing it from you at the moment. But I will go and check, do my homework like I always do, Dad, and see exactly how if it's allegations, if this is just
it's on his Twitter. It's on his Twitter page.
A little gray area or whatever.
There's
we'll
no
see
gray.
about that.
It's on his Twitter page.
Yeah. And I think also, can I just add one more thing?
Sure.
I think what we see with CNN and Fox, you have panels of people, right? If you sit in front of, say, CNN or Fox all day, you're going to be, and I'm going to say somewhat brainwashed. You know, if you're going to be focusing hours and hours on your little narrative that you want to listen to, not you, Dan, but folks do, right? They get into their little echo chambers and they want to be persuaded or they want to listen to what they want to listen to. And that's where we're at. I mean, as you said, you can go on TikTok, you can go on Facebook. It's malicious out there. And if our young people are on those particular sites, and they are, like I don't know how many hours a young person spends on them, or adults for that matter, Of course. But no, I don't agree with that. I think freedom of speech. But again, in our own country here, I think we're seeing things. Jordan Peterson, if anybody has heard about his battle, journalism and what have you, right? The University of Toronto, I believe he worked at. And he's a very interesting man to listen to. I'm not saying, again, he's got a very good point on freedom of speech and what we're forced to say or we're not allowed to say. How about that? In the society that's ever so changing, we're changing the language, right? We're changing there's new words in our language in the dictionary now we've never heard of. And when it comes to fake news, do your homework, folks. And no, Dan, I disagree. We need freedom of speech, of course. I mean, you look at China, people are being listened to, and you don't think that's happening in our own country? When you have these TVs, you have, Alexa, I guess, if you will, and various other things, you don't think we're being monitored and we're being checked into what our interests are, where our algorithms are? The world is changing, Dan, but this is, I will say right now, and this is a plug for you and radio. You have boots on the ground folks that call in. They're not always right, they're not always wrong. But at least with radio, you can hear, like I said, boots on the ground, and I love it. And we don't have enough of that. And, I appreciate you, and I appreciate your station and Rogers to allow this platform, hopefully for a very, very, very long time. And I think people may be turning more towards radio as well, something a little bit more raw. Anyways, that's all I have to say, Dan. Thanks for
Dave.
taking my call. I do appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. And I agree with Dave that we need more boots on the ground people, and this business, this industry, radio is not what it was even 15 years ago, right? But I think that forums like this can let's say catch the ire of those in power, and if we open that door just a crack, somebody's going to kick it in. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. This one from Don, and it reads, hello, Dan. I had to shake my head when I heard Trump calling on nations to send military ships to the Persian Gulf. It reminds me of a quote that these nations' representatives should send to Trump. Poor planning on your part doesn't constitute an emergency on my part. And that joins us from Don. Rob writes, are calls in Canada to defund the CBC really that different than Trump threatening licenses in the U.S.? That's different. Perhaps we shouldn't be so smug. And that joins us from Rob. Rob, I will, and I'm pretty consistent in my thoughts on the CBC. I think that the CBC is extremely important for our country. I think the CBC is an organization that Canadians from coast to coast to coast can access and use. And when it comes to government funding for the CBC, I get it. That's a large enterprise that costs millions and millions of dollars to run. I understand that. I think the CBC does a very good job of what it does. That being said, the CBC also competes with what we're doing right here. And I don't, or we don't, or this radio station or private radio across the country don't have the luxury of that government grant at the end of every year. So we rely exclusively on advertising revenue. Doesn't feel like a fair playing field, right? Speaking of fairness. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Hello, Chris.
Good morning, sir.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
Oh, I'm just going to do what our dearly departed and respected Bill Mont used to do. I'm just going to hit a couple of three things quickly if I can.
Sure.
One of the councillors, I forget which one it was now, had mentioned about how apartment buildings were not capped, so the taxation was unfair. Essentially, they are capped. They're capped by income. The Property Valuation Services analyzes income and expense information submitted by the property owner to justify, and they value their property based upon that. So if your apartment building is identical to mine, say yours is paid off, you're making all kinds of money, your assessment is going to be higher than mine if I have more expenses.
Really?
So, yeah. So, and within Nova Scotia, Property Valuation Services uses that income approach to assess apartment buildings and any other income-producing commercial properties. So it's not based on necessarily what it would cost to rebuild or whatever. So I guess what I'm getting at is that the apartment buildings do have a control. It's not really a cap, but it is sort of a control as to how high the assessment can go. And if you feel your assessment as a property owner or as an apartment building owner, if your assessment is too high, you can submit an appeal to the Property Valuation Services along with your updated income and expense details, and they will, if you can justify that you're not making as much money as you should be with that investment, they will lower the property assessment for you.
Well, a regular homeowner can appeal to the same group,
right? But Dan, it's a different thing.
Is it?
Totally. They don't. When you appeal your residential, your single-family home, your income is not looked at by Property Valuation Services. They don't care if you're making $1 million a year or $10 a year. They just don't care. They're going to analyze it. They're going to come in, maybe. They'll take a drive-by. They'll look at the outside. They might make an appointment to come inside and have a look at your property. They'll assess it in its physical state and so on like that, and use sales data and other approaches, replacement costs per square foot, all this sort of thing, to come up with an assessment. And as they will tell you, if you call and request to have an appeal, they will say, yeah, but we can't guarantee that we won't increase it. So the homeowner's got that hanging over their head.
Right, so you can go either way on the assessor, on the appeal, right?
This is the whole point. So a lot of property owners are reluctant to appeal their assessment based on the fact that this veiled threat, well, it's not really veiled, it's blatant, that they will tell you, well, we can't guarantee because we might come in and find out that it's better than we think, so it could increase your property assessment. So there is that threat.
Right.
And that makes it difficult. But I just thought people should know that landlords out there with buildings do have a mechanism by which they can have their assessments reviewed based upon the income. And as I've always said, Dan, I said it the other day on the show, the only fair tax is income tax. A lot of people will disagree with me, but I think fundamentally you would have to agree that I'm correct on that. Is it difficult to tax everything we use based on your income? Yeah, sure as hell is. I'll be the first one to admit that. But at least with the multi-unit residential buildings and rentals, there is the mechanism there where you can bring the income into it, whereby that could, in fact, mitigate the cost to tenants. However, there's one building I came across on Coburg Road in Halifax, for example. It's sold. And I don't know why this assessment is off so much, but it sold a couple of years ago for just over $12 million. Its tax assessment by Property Valuation Services is less than $3 million.
Right.
So that's like 25% of what its actual value is proven to be. Now, why it's that way, I don't know. Maybe they appealed it somehow to income or whatever the case might be. But I guess my point in this is that the way our property taxes are assessed is not a fair taxation for anybody involved. It really and truly isn't. And the councillors are always talking about getting rid of the cap, because if we could ever get rid of the cap, look at all that assessment we'd have to tax. Well, that's low-hanging fruit. They don't want to put in the effort that it takes to actually try and restructure the system so that it would be more beneficial to everyone as a whole. For example, a few years ago in District 7, South End downtown where I live, there was a staff report that indicated that only 50% of the taxes collected in that district went to provide services by HRM to that district. What happens to the other 50%? Obviously, it goes to subsidize other districts in HRM. So from that standpoint, I'm sure a lot of assessments, that's what the case is, and how the city would actually lay out a plan whereby you'd be assessed on the cost of services provided. I'm sure they can do it because they did it for this report a few years ago. So that would be essentially, I think, and I think you'll probably agree with me, a sort of a user pay system. The services that you receive, you're actually paying for them. Would you agree with that, Dan?
Well, that's what I've been saying all along, is paying for what the services provided, right?
Yeah, but do you think it should be mitigated to a certain degree by the person or the couple or whatever that own the home, their ability to pay as well? Well,
yeah, but then you're going to run into the and I appreciate your points, Chris. I do, but then you're going to run into the fact that there's somebody living on the same street that is a single person. They're a widower or they're on a pension and they're making much less income than the guy next door who could be a doctor, right?
That's right. So they would pay less property taxes than the doctor would pay. Here again, it all reverts back. When you think of all these arguments, both pro and con, that we come up with, Dan, it all comes back to, doesn't it? Income. It's all based upon a person's income, whether it would be easy or difficult, fair or unfair for a person to pay their bill, be it their income tax bill or the property tax bill or what have you. The province of New Brunswick obviously saw a problem with property assessments because this year, or in 2005 for the upcoming year, they froze the assessments of the city of Fredericton. So there could be no assessment increases in the city of Fredericton. So they've obviously are grappling with the same problem that municipal government here is as well. And one more thing, if I can.
Very quickly.
This $126 million forum, it's not $126 million. I have been told by reliable sources the estimate is closer to $160 to $180 million. They've got an opportunity that they could lease the land to a developer, have the developer put in the ice pads, some residential apartments and condos if they want, other housing, what have you. That, in my opinion, would be the best way to go because they've got an opportunity that they could get net money coming out of this thing. And you know yourself, anything the government gets involved in, doesn't matter what level of government it is, provincial, federal, or municipal, they can't run a business and make money. They just can't. That's not their business. Let the private developer do it. Lease the land to them on a 99-year or a 200-year lease or whatever the heck they want to come up with. They're never going to have the opportunity to do this again. And if they give that opportunity away, it's just like what my mother and grandmother always used to say. They give away their ass and crap through the ribs. They can't
Chris,
do that.
Thanks, man. We're really late. I appreciate it. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're back after the break. All right, welcome back. It's all good. We're moving forward here on a Monday. It's a Monday, all right. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Very quickly before we go back to the phone lines, a lot of you are reacting to my thoughts on a free press, and you're sending me emails and screenshots, and I love them. I appreciate it, of the Travis Danrange trial or testimony. It's not a trial. And saying that the CBC is not allowing conservatives on. I'm paraphrasing because we're almost out of time. Haven't followed the whole thing, followed some of it, but I watch Power and Politics quite frequently, and I see a conservative on that program almost every day. So if Power and Politics has conservatives on it, then why wouldn't they let Dan Range's show have conservatives on it? Not suggesting that he's wrong, but it's an interesting question. Just a bit of a different perspective. Hello, John.
Hi. It was Don. Maybe I just make sure you get the right
John.
name.
It's Don. Sorry, you're Don?
Yeah.
My bad. I apologize, sir.
Yeah, no, just want to make sure I was the right guy. Just regarding the Travis Danrange interview, and I have no problem with a national broadcaster like the CBC. I think it's actually probably a good use of our tax money, but when it is biased, that's a problem. And you mentioned conservatives on Cochrane's show. They're usually pretty weak conservatives.
I've seen Poilievre on it.
My issue. Well, not very often.
Well, that's because he doesn't do media. That's not necessarily everybody's fault.
Right, and but there's all kinds of other conservatives that would gladly go on that show. And if you look at the ones that they have on...
I've seen Andrew Scheer on it. Andrew Scheer's kind of a strong conservative, isn't he?
Yeah, but like I say, it's not. I'm talking about when they have their panels. When you look at their panels that they have every night, Sure, they're going to interview the odd conservative here and there.
But wouldn't it? And Don, I don't mean to take this over, but wouldn't it be kind of counterintuitive to say that the CBC doesn't let conservatives on the air if they let them on one show but not the other?
Well, no, but it's the panels where they're discussing stuff. Sure, they'll have Poilievre on, or they'll have Scheer on for a topic or two. But every night when they have their political panels on,
right.
It's not a consistent, strong conservative voice. I think they cherry pick when to bring a conservative on, what topic to talk about. And they don't have a good, strong.
I'll disagree. I think that they talk about the topic of the day, and to say that one's not as strong, I will suggest some of the Liberals or even the NDP aren't strong that are on there.
Well, I guess we'll have to agree to disagree on that one.
Sure, I agree. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks, Don. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. I don't know the inner workings of how Travis's show worked. I don't know what his producers were told. I don't know what his executive producers were told. I don't know if that was in fact the case. It's his word against the CBC's, at least at this point. I understand all of that. But you can't use it as a blanket. You can't say the CBC's biased. They're not letting any conservatives on the air when there's one on every night on Power Politics on the same network. I just don't understand that. If the CBC was that biased that some of you are suggesting to me today, then there wouldn't be anyone on anywhere. And that's just not the case. They're on there every night. Last word goes to Jeremy today. Jeremy, how are you?
Not too bad. How are you doing, sir?
Well, what's on your mind?
Just the population.
Okay.
So, do you think that everybody is being pushed out, or do you think everybody is being pulled in when it comes to the population?
I don't understand your question.
So, in other words, foreigners and all that, you know?
They're being pushed out or pulled. Jeremy, and I'm not trying to be flippant here. I just don't understand your question.
Yeah, I had a 90-year-old aunt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he lived here for about, about 75 years.
Okay.
And she'd been pushed out of her spot because they told her she's going to die.
Pushed out of her spot where? At home?
Yes.
Okay.
Where she resides.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So did they move her to another home or to make a nursing home or something?
No.
Just threw her on the street?
Trying to say is, what?
They just threw her on the street?
She's dead now.
Oh, okay. I understand. Okay. Got it.
So it's like they pushed her to her home, but they made sure that she died first so that he could just get out.
Okay.
And that's exactly what they said. So I don't even know in what route to go to that towards anybody, but I think it's very harsh that someone's in their dying days that they should be pushed out of their home.
I'll agree with you 100%.
Yeah, man. And it just doesn't seem correct, you know? Like, I would never do nothing like that. I don't think we're all cruel people. But, I mean...
All right, Jeremy.
It's very crazy.
Sorry, man. I'm right up against the break. I appreciate it, sir. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Remember that number because we're going to do this again tomorrow. We're going to open up the telephone lines at 11 o'clock, and we're going to do another full hour of the bastion of democracy that one of the people that used to sit in this chair used to call it. The open hour certainly gives everybody a chance to share their opinions, even if the leaders don't like them. We're back after the news. Tell you, I woke up Saturday morning and then midway through the day I looked out my window and it was like a blizzard out there. And then I remembered what Allister told me. He says that we were going to get 5 to 10 centimeters of snow. And I'll tell you what, I think we got the higher end of that, at least in my area of the world. And now we're looking at another precipitation event. This one is not going to be as as hard to shovel as the other stuff is, this one's going to be a rain event, and it's going to be significant. In fact, there is already a weather warning out, a yellow alert for this rainfall that's coming. On the line with us, our meteorologist, that's Allister Aalders. Allister, how are you?
Not bad, Dan. How are you?
It was we've had lots of water the last couple of days.
Yeah, we certainly have. I mean, as you mentioned off the top there, that 10 centimeters of snow that we had on Saturday. It's still, a lot of it melted, but it's still kind of sticking around, and it did really make for some wet conditions Saturday night and Sunday, and even a bit today. And now we're on tap for quite a bit of rain. So things are quite soggy out there. And obviously with the rain in the forecast, we've been seeing that ground start to thaw, but it's still partially frozen. So obviously some concerns, obviously, that the ground won't absorb this rain as fast as it usually can. So, an increased risk of pooling and localized flooding with this system. So damp and wet indeed, Dan.
So, Allister, what's driving this? Where's this weather coming from?
So the center of the system itself is currently positioned near the Great Lakes. And parts of northern Ontario, northern Quebec getting into a significant late-season winter storm. Very high snowfall rates through parts of northern Ontario and northern Quebec and southern Ontario, southern Quebec getting into the rainy and windy side of this system, but they'll see falling temperatures later today. So the system itself is tracking well to our west, which tends to put us on the warmer side of these types of systems, hence why this is going to be a rainier system. So we have the warm front lifting in ahead of it as we go throughout the day today and the night tonight, and then that trailing cold front starts to move through on Tuesday. So we're not seeing the center of the system itself tracking through. The low will actually move to sit, near northern Labrador by Wednesday morning. But the associated weather fronts that are coming through are what will drive the rain and high winds with this system for us.
We're looking, 30 to 50 millimeters?
Yeah, that's definitely a good range here for Halifax and Metro, 30 to 50 millimeters. I do think many or most of us will probably be closer to the 40 to 50 millimeter range. And because we could see these downpours and maybe even a few rumbles of thunder, there is the potential that some localized pockets could get closer to 60 millimeters. But in general, for Halifax and much of the province, it's a 30 to 50 millimeter rainfall event with locally higher amounts along the Atlantic coast and possibly a bit less through parts of the Annapolis Valley and North Shore, but still quite a bit of rain for much of the province indeed.
On the other side of it, of course, Tuesday is going to be a lot of wet revelers that are going out to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. And they may want to hold on to those green hats because it looks like we're going to have some gusty winds that could reach, even 90 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, don't have the umbrella because it'll just blow away.
Right.
Or it'll, blow inside out and then it won't be any use to you. But yeah, this system is coming in two waves. We have the first initial rain coming in late this afternoon and this evening, and the winds start to pick up too, gusting, upwards of 60 and 70 through the evening and overnight. It is starting to get a bit breezy out there now. But along the cold front, as it tracks through on Tuesday, we get another round of rain, and that's when we're expecting the highest winds with this system. Southerly winds gusting anywhere from, looks like right now, 70 to 90 kilometers per hour, widespread for much of the province, including here in Halifax. And I do think at times those winds will gust to 90, maybe even reaching locally 100 kilometers per hour. So this is through Tuesday morning to early afternoon. So some very high winds with the system. Obviously, that does raise concerns that perhaps we will see some power outages. Also the potential, maybe we see some disruptions to services such as ferries in the region. But certainly very wet and windy Tuesday morning if you're, as you mentioned, heading out to any St. Patrick's Day plans or just commuting to work on Tuesday, it's going to be very wet and windy. The weather does start to improve later in the day. The rain starts to taper off late afternoon into the evening, and those winds will still be breezy but start to subside through Tuesday afternoon to evening. So they peak Tuesday morning upwards of easily 80 and 90, locally 100, and then start to improve later in the day Tuesday.
The good news out of all this stuff, Allister, is that temperatures are going into the double digits.
Very mild with the system. You know, we'll be on the rise tonight, 11 degrees late this evening and overnight tonight. And then tomorrow highs near 13 degrees in HRM. Temperatures will be falling on the backside of the system. So Tuesday night into Wednesday, we're down to about -3 here in Halifax.
That's a big swing.
So it is a big swing. It's not as fast as what some other folks will be dealing with from this system. So thankfully, it doesn't look like, one of those situations where the rain ends and we see that immediate freeze, the flash freeze. However, obviously, given it will be quite wet and mild, and then temperatures do fall Tuesday night into Wednesday, obviously any wet or untreated surfaces could be icing up Tuesday night to Wednesday morning. But it is quite the temperature swing, and then only -1 for the high on Wednesday. So we're going from unseasonably mild, to unseasonably cold. The normal high for this time of year, we're now at 4 degrees. So that is cooler than normal. And temperatures generally look to stay, a bit cooler than average, +1 Thursday and 3 degrees on Friday. So a bit cooler than average for the rest of the week, but at least some recovery by Friday.
12 hours of daylight.
Yeah, it's nice to see that sun setting, we're now at about 20 after 7 in the evening, and as 25 after 7 sunrises. So it is very nice to see, and it makes things a whole lot better, I think, for a lot of us. I know some miss having the early daylight, but we will be quickly catching up on that. We're gaining, over 3 minutes of daylight per day now.
Yeah, for sure. And we're getting into the end of the F word. I don't see anything with that resembles flurries until later in the week, until Friday.
Yeah, I mean, there's still obviously perhaps some hints that we could see some flurries or light periods of snow, a few weak disturbances late week through the weekend. So, obviously winter is winding down and spring is almost here, but obviously we know it's not, as spring begins, we know the snow just doesn't stop. So hopefully we're through from any, major winter storms. We'll have to see if Sheila is going to brush any storms out for us this year. Maybe we can be optimistic and say that it's a rainy Sheila's brush this year, but certainly we'll keep an eye on that. But obviously things only get better really from here with longer days, warmer temperatures, and we're closer to the warmer, brighter weather than the darker and snowy, cold weather. So that is always positive.
Allister, appreciate it, my friend. Hope you have a fantastic day. You can hear Allister's forecasts in the morning and in the evening, and during the drives, and get the very latest of what's going on. We're going to stop down. We're going to take a break. Brent crude down 1.3%. WTI, that's West Texas, down 3.5%. Gasoline prices at New York are down about 3.5 tenths a point. What's going to happen with gas prices after we saw yet another interrupter clause on the weekend? We're going to dig into that when we return. All right, welcome back. Before we dig into those gas prices, I know that it's a date or a series of dates that gets circled on many Nova Scotians' fall calendars, and that is the annual pilgrimage to Celtic Colours. And it's going to celebrate its 30th anniversary this year, but some concerns within the organizing committee, the group that puts on the festival each and every year after the provincial budget eliminated some of their funding. Very pleased to welcome to the show to tell us a little bit more about what this means, the chair of the Celtic Colours International Festival Board of Directors, It's Bob MacEachern. Bob, how are you?
Good, Dan. Good to talk to you today.
I guess the first question that many are asking is the festival a go?
The festival is a go for the 30th anniversary coming up in October. There's no question about that. I guess the only question is at this point is, how it's going to look, and will there be any changes because of the funding cut?
How much did it hit your bottom line? How much money did the government cut from your funding?
Well, at 20% across the board to arts and culture and other organizations, hit to it's a hit at the time. Our programming was pretty much set. You can appreciate that we reach out to artists beginning to plan for another festival shortly after the previous festival has completed. So we're well into the planning for the 2026 festival season.
Sorry, Bob, I lost you for the first little bit there. How much did you lose?
Yeah, we're looking at $40,000 loss on that 20% cut across the board.
Which is going to hurt, right?
It will. Any cut hurts, and especially the timing of the cut. In our presentations to government officials, we had come back and said, we could probably easily absorb a 10% cut at this juncture. And it's because our programming and all the things that we need to put in place are well underway. So to look at that, 40% or the 20% cut at $40,000, it makes it a little more difficult given the timing.
Bob, tell me a little bit about what this means. Obviously, you've got a big lineup planned for the 30th anniversary to celebrate the success of the Celtic Colours Festival. But with that reduction in funding, is that going to change things moving forward?
Well, right now we're still looking at this, Dan, as to what the impact could be on the festival. It's early going, obviously, and we're looking at, what elements of the festival can we tweak in order to absorb that cut, if you will. We do a lot of programming around Celtic Colours, not just those 50-plus concerts that we host across Cape Breton Island, but there's also a school programming. So we bring musicians into schools across the island, and we've impacted about 6,500 students with that program alone. So, ideally, we'd like to see the core of our business not be impacted by such cuts. So we'd be looking at maybe some of those other peripheral but important elements of the festival when it comes to trying to make up that loss of the budget. But, for us, Dan, it's not just about Celtic Colours, and we obviously are a lead festival in Cape Breton, but also Nova Scotia. We feel that we probably have the largest economic impact of any festival that is hosted in Nova Scotia. We've generated somewhere in the $18.2 million in economic activity for the province, and off that, about 15 to 16 million alone. So it's pretty significant. So our big concern right now is, how does this impact the other arts and cultural programming across Cape Breton and Nova Scotia? And what is the signal the provincial government is giving us? They've been super supportive over the past, but is this a change in philosophy around arts and culture support? We hope not, but that's a bigger concern for us for sure.
The whole community has been impacted by these, right?
No question about it. We employ, not just staff, we employ artists who depend on Celtic Colours as a significant part of their income for the year. Because you book an artist, and the majority of the artists are Cape Bretoners and Nova Scotians. So you employ those for 4 or 5 shows. It's a significant part of their income for the full 12-month period. And putting a lot of money back into the communities. When we go out and we host these events, we do a nice split of income for the local communities, and that enables them to do things like upgrade their facilities for accessibility or heat pumps or whatever the case may be. They use Celtic Colours as a catalyst to apply for grants and supports to make sure that their community hall can operate 12 months of the year as opposed to, struggling to keep the doors open. So, Celtic Colours plays a huge impact in a lot of aspects of the social fabric of Cape Breton Island.
Bob, I know you're still in the planning stages. The festival is slated to go on the 9th to the 17th of October. We're going to get tickets in July. Any inside information you want to give us on who's coming this year?
Well, I'll tell you, it's going to be great. As you mentioned off the top, Dan, it's our 30th anniversary, and that's a reason itself to celebrate. But we had such a phenomenal year last year that we're very much motivated to maybe step up our game a little bit. Again, this may present a bit of a challenge to us, but we have a wonderful team, an incredible 1,700 team of volunteers as well who helped put this on, and it's going to be dynamic. I know that. Our sales last year were amazing. We were pretty much sold out. When it comes to festivals and looking at our numbers, they would consider all of the festival a sellout because, you get to a certain percentage and you say, we really can't accommodate many more. So we're expecting a similar response from our patrons this year.
Premier was in our studio here on Friday and promised that as part of the budgeting process moving forward that he was going to do a better job and his government was going to do a better job at consulting with organizations and groups. And I hope, Bob, that he reaches out to you guys and you can come to some sort of conclusion here.
Yeah, they've been great up to this point. I got to give credit to the provincial government. This one kind of took us off guard, but we're hopeful that good, solid relationship with the department that supports us, communities, culture, tourism, and heritage, will be able to come back to the table and show us that the government has a long-term commitment to arts and culture in Nova Scotia.
Bob, I appreciate your time.
Great, Dan. Always good talking to you.
That is Bob MacEachern. He is the chair of the Celtic Colours International Festival Board of Directors. 30th anniversary this year saw a significant cut to their budget as they celebrate that milestone as part of the provincial budget of a few weeks ago, where many groups and organizations, particularly within the arts and the culture and the tourism sectors, all still reeling from those cuts made by the province. The Premier, while he was in the studio here with us on Friday, suggested that he's willing to listen. And I hope that the Premier lives up to his word when we move forward from this and into this year and in the next budgeting cycle for next year. Important events, millions of dollars generated. That thing turned well over $750,000 in ticket sales and spin-offs last year alone in Cape Breton, right? It's pretty outstanding. Time for us to take yet another break. When we come back, what the heck is going on at the gas pump? Every time I turn around, gasoline is up. Diesel is what? $2.22 a liter. Where's it going to go from here? A conversation with petroleum analyst, with Gas Buddy. That's Patrick de Haan. He's next. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. We're back after the news. So we saw a couple interrupter clauses last week, and then we saw the UARB use its weekly adjustment and lowered the price for gasoline, and then one day later they used the interrupter clause again and raised it 6.7 cents a liter, and where it sits now, 168.7. Diesel prices were also up this weekend. They're at $2.20. I saw some gas stations on my drive in today selling a couple of cents higher than that. The station around the corner of my neighborhood was selling it at $2.22. So we're certainly paying a lot for gas as the war in Iran continues to rumble along, I guess, in the Strait of Hormuz, although there have been some transits through there, not a whole lot of transits through there, and oil continues to be held up at that tiny piece of real estate in the Persian Gulf, and that's impacting prices right around the world. Very pleased to welcome back to the show from Gas Buddy. That's Patrick de Haan. Patrick, how are you?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
I mean, this is the $1 million question, right? Is where are we done with these big swings? Are we starting to level out, or this changes by the hour? It seems.
It really does. I mean, geopolitical tension that will change by the hour, and we don't really have a crystal ball on where things will head. As you point out, though, the average price for diesel in Halifax now $222.2 on average. Regular gasoline, thankfully, a bit below that, but at about 168.7 has climbed significantly. oil prices are taking a bit of a breather. I think some of that is looking at the market, starting to see some ships that are traveling through the Strait of Hormuz, starting to see some language that would represent an improvement, some dialogue happening as well. And that may put things into a pause for now. I would point out, though, that depending on how things continue in the next week or two, we will be making a step towards summer gasoline here in a couple of weeks. Right. And so that will eventually lead to a jolt in gasoline that probably won't be felt in diesel. But depending on exactly how the situation unfolds, if there is a big improvement in the situation between Iran and the U.S., that seasonal impact could be offset by a potential decline from the Iran situation. So just a lot of levers all moving differently. For now, there may be a little bit of hope, reason to be optimistic as WTI crude oil price is down about 3.5% today. But all in all, not necessarily a huge improvement in price, just the fact that the increases may slow down.
Patrick, last week in light of all of this increase in a barrel of oil, the value and gasoline prices worldwide, we saw a release of some 400,000 barrels of oil from the strategic oil reserves, and that didn't even move the needle. Did that surprise you?
Not really. I think the market, as a petroleum analyst, the big difference here is, though it sounds great, the optics, also feel pretty good. All in all, it's the rate of increase, or I should say rate of release of those strategic oil reserve barrels that is of utmost importance. The market is looking for a way that the 20 million barrel a day blockage in the Strait of Hormuz would be offset. And the release reserves are only going to amount, at least from the U.S.'s part, only amount to about 1 million barrels a day. So there's still a gaping hole between the 1 million barrels a day the U.S. plans to release and the 20 million barrels a day being blocked by Iran's threats in the Strait of Hormuz. So, oil prices haven't reacted to that. They're starting to react more on the hope that ships may start transiting through. We are seeing some movement of India's vessels to the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran continues to ship oil to the global market. And of course, the biggest beneficiary of all of this is probably Russia, right, who now has seen sanctions on the U.S. or by the U.S. eased. And not only that, but they're selling into the market at a very high price. So all of that leading to a little bit of relief, but hard to know if it's going to be, something that sticks around or if the situation would suddenly worsen again.
Patrick, and there's been a lot of, obviously, focus on these oil tankers that are stuck and the lack of production in the Persian Gulf, lack of oil transiting through the Strait of Hormuz. Are we in danger because the supply's been impacted for so long now? And I know I think it's 1/5 of the world's oil that comes through that area. Yeah. Are we in danger that we're going to run out of product to refine, and then of course that would create a gasoline shortage?
We're not too much of a risk of that here in North America. Canada being a very large oil producer, as long as that keeps up. The U.S. also a major oil producer. So we're insulated from the supply aspect of this, but we're not insulated from the pricing aspect. And though, we don't receive oil, it's a global market. It's kind of like hoping that home prices would only go up in one neighborhood, not the entire province or the city. I mean, all these things move at the same time, generally speaking, and the oil market is the same. You can't, you can't just fence yourself off. Home prices going up everywhere. Oil prices go up everywhere based on the dynamics as well as the global supply of oil. So for now, we'll have to dig a bit deeper until there's some sort of more solid improvement. But I'm not expecting any record-setting levels, at least where we stand at this moment.
What kind of impact do you think this is going to have on production in places like Alberta? You mentioned that we're an oil-producing country. Most of that gets shipped into the United States. What kind of impact is obviously the Canada Select prices up for the oil that goes south? That this could actually be good news for Alberta.
Well, certainly terrific news for Alberta. To your point, Western Canadian Select crude oil right now at about $86.50 a barrel. That is terrific news for the province, and any revenue that's generated from that can be shared. I don't know exactly the breakdown of how those royalties work in Canada, but generally speaking, when there's a windfall for the province, it can also be a windfall for the federal government as well, depending on how those royalties are set up for. Having said that, it could also, in the short term, depending on how high oil prices remain elevated, It could also incentivize any incremental increases in oil production, unlike many Middle Eastern oil producers that hold some discipline over how much the oil spigot is opened. Generally in Canada, it's not necessarily a spigot to be controlled by the government, but it's controlled by the price. And so if there is any increased capacity right now for Canadian oil producers, well, you can certainly expect that they will maximize and make best use of oil prices that in some cases are now up over $30 to $35 a barrel for Western Canadian Select compared to where we were just a couple months ago.
If the situation continues to escalate in Iran, I know these are crystal ball questions, but if it does and we don't see any significant change in the Strait of Hormuz, is it conceivable we could see $200 per barrel for Brent and for WTI?
I mean, that is a possibility. The longer the situation goes, and in economics, you learn all about the balances of supply and demand.
Right.
Gasoline demand inelastic, diesel demand even more inelastic, meaning that people still need diesel to ship goods to the market. Oil prices would continue to go up if the trade is blocked until demand comes down to balance the amount of supply that's currently being produced, meaning we have a 20 million barrel hole. It's conceivable if that hole continues, that oil prices will continue to rise globally until demand falls globally to better match what is accurately or currently being produced, and that's about 80 million barrels a day. So, Qatar's energy minister said maybe $150 isn't out of the possibility. Iran has suggested $200 could happen. The truth of the matter is everyone's just throwing numbers out, and we don't really know because we've never really experienced a disruption like this. So conceivably, record-setting oil prices are not impossible, but I think given the situation, there's a lot of pressure on both the U.S. and many oil producers and consumers in Europe and Asia to make sure it doesn't get to that point.
Patrick, appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Patrick Haan is a petroleum analyst and media commentator with Gas Buddy. Looks like things are starting to level out at least a little bit, but the region in that vital energy corridor on a knife's edge, right? And all it takes is one piece of good news to change the market, one piece of bad news to change the market, and when it does, the price swings are huge, and then we end up feeling that here. If prices, as I look at them right now, don't change, I don't suspect we'll see an interrupter this week, but that can change on a moment's notice. We're going to take a break. I mentioned this in our conversation with Allister yesterday. And there's been a flag raising this hour at City Hall to commemorate the holiday, as I think it should be, is St. Patrick's Day, and Irish, Canadian, and the partnership. What does St. Patrick's Day mean for HRM? A conversation with the co-owner down there at the Old Triangle, Brendan Doherty. St. Patrick's Day's tomorrow. Is the green beer ready? We're back after the break. Welcome back. I know it's a date that gets circled on a lot of calendars, usually in green ink, as in fact there are some countdown clocks, and I do believe there's one in the Old Triangle that count down to tomorrow's big event, and that is, of course, St. Patrick's Day, where we celebrate all things Irish, and there's a lot of things that happen with that day, and usually centered around I call it the Fun District downtown, and the Old Triangle is certainly in the Fun District, and the co-owner of the Old Triangle, Brendan Doherty, is joining me on the phone. Brendan, how are you?
Good, thanks, Dan. How are you?
You got everything ready? Are you all set?
Yeah, I'm sitting here cutting limes as we speak, getting ready for the morning.
So tell me about the importance of St. Patrick's Day for an organization or a restaurant like Old Triangle.
It's funny. Patrick's Day is one of those ones we always tell people we don't actually do Patrick's Day. It actually just happens to us.
Right.
We're very, we open at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning with the big party, and we've got live music going on all day. But as much as we put the effort into having a good time, we're really fortunate in this part of the world that the Irish community and its roots run so deep and through so many, different areas of the region that, hey, what can I say? Halifax knows how to celebrate St. Patrick's Day.
We certainly do, Brendan, and not necessarily the busiest time of the year for bars and restaurants like yours, this is certainly a welcome shot in the arm.
It is a great shot in the arm, especially we were just talking about that. We had a real winter this year and lots of snow days and lots of closures and late openings. And, Patrick's Day, this time of year, we're always looking forward to that bit of a revenue shot to the arm. But this year especially, it's always welcomed.
For those that are maybe new to how Halifax celebrates St. Patrick's Day, Brendan, you guys, you're going to open up really early tomorrow.
We do, yeah. We open at 7 a.m. We've got the full band on the stage. We've got the big Irish or Canadian breakfast, or if you want, or just bacon and eggs if you're there for the Guinness, of course. And, throughout the day, we've got 9 different bands on 2 different stages. We have our second floor opening at noon, and with a capacity of over 400 people, which is a good thing tomorrow. We've been saying the weather's looking like a rather Irish day for tomorrow.
For
sure. With the rain and stuff. So, we're looking forward to a great time. And as we're telling people, we're glad it doesn't rain in an Irish pub.
It doesn't rain in the Irish pub, at least until closing time.
No, that's right. Yeah, until the lights come on.
Yeah, for sure. Brendan, this is a long-standing tradition in Halifax. I've been in a number of different places that purport to have strong Irish connections, but boy, they really know how to do it here.
We do. Every year at 7 a.m. we've got about 200 people standing in line, and about 7:05 we're full up, and it's it is really cool. Aside from the fact it's a bar and we're opening early and serving pints, the community atmosphere you see is really awesome. We have a ton of people who will come in just to have breakfast and a coffee before they go to work, and you get a lot of families who are coming in. We offer free face painting for a few hours from 10 until 2 tomorrow. So we have a bunch of people who come in and get all face painted up as well as wearing all their green. And, aside from it being a bar and a really fun day to go have a bunch of pints again, it's really the sense of community and the togetherness that St. Patrick's Day brings is honestly, we're very fortunate. We find ourselves very fortunate to be able to.
I've been at the Old Triangle on this day in the past, and speaking of community, it's tough to look around the room or the rooms and not see everybody smiling, right?
Absolutely. As you say, the Irish bar, there's no strangers in the Irish bar. There's just friends you haven't met yet. And especially on Patrick's Day, it's what a day. What can you say about it? There's just there's people are having a great time, whether it's with friends they brought there or friends they've met while there, or even if it's an annual tradition of getting together, once a year just for St. Patrick's Day. It's especially in these times where we're seeing so much anxiety and difficulty in the world. The sense of community, getting together and having a laugh over a jar is really something we appreciate.
Making me thirsty, Brendan.
Oh, hey, come on down. We're open all day today, too.
All right, appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you very much, Dan. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone listening.
Same to you, sir. That's Brendan Doherty. He is, of course, the co-owner down there at the Old Triangle. They will, and he's not exaggerating, folks. If this is your first St. Patrick's Day in HRM or you're just visiting, they really do. There will be a lineup of, I didn't believe it. When I first moved here, I'm like, yeah, whatever. They're going to open up the doors at 7. It's just a bit of a joke, and there'll be a couple of hardliners in there, and that's it. No, if that is anything but is the case. There will be 200 people lined up at that establishment before the doors open, and it'll be hopping in there from 7 until close, and of course lots of bands and entertainment and a lot of fun, and not the only place that's doing it, right? I'm sure there will be lots of people all along that entertainment district tomorrow taking part in St. Patrick's Day. And why the heck not, right? He's right. We've had a winter. It's been a tough go-around. The world is on edge. What a time to just kind of park everything and go out and pretend you're Irish. I'm not Irish. I have zero Irish in me, but everybody gets to be Irish for at least for one day, wearing of the green, as they say, right? And I don't know. There's nothing wrong with a pint of Guinness at 7 in the morning, is there? I guess. Anyway, of course, we encourage you that if you are going to go out and revel in the fun and the frivolity that is St. Patrick's Day in downtown Halifax or downtown Dartmouth or wherever you're listening to us today, that you do so responsibly and make sure you got yourself a ride home, because we don't want a fun day that is looked forward to all you're turning into tragedy. So please just be smart, get out there, enjoy it, and but make sure you got yourself a ride home, because we don't want anybody to end up on the wrong side of the law or worse, right? That's the joy of this weekend, or this day, and don't want to see it end like in tragedy. Anyway, that's looking forward to it, and I think maybe might pop down there tomorrow after the show just to say hi to Brendan and Brian and all the folks down at the Old Triangle and all of the good folks down there in the entertainment district in downtown Halifax. It's a big day for them, and I hope that you can get out there and enjoy it. We're almost done on the show here today. Folks, tomorrow we have a big show planned for you here, as we do every Tuesday on the Todd Veinotte Show. We're going to dig into a little bit more about the coastal access. This has been a topic that's been discussed here several times. We know we're very lucky. I say this all the time at the end of the show. We're very lucky to live where we do and have access to some of the most beautiful stretches of shoreline, I think, in North America. But some of that access is a bit in question. There's property rights, there's fences, there's trails being cut off. Anyway, there's a symposium that's coming to HRM next week that's going to talk about coastal access, and we'll have a conversation with somebody from Dalhousie about it and what this means on part of the show tomorrow. So I hope that you can join us. Don't forget, at 11 o'clock, we're going to open up the telephone lines, and that gives us an opportunity for the second open hour of the week. Good discussion today. We agree to disagree on some things, but that's the beauty of this, and that's why it is so important that we maintain a free press and a free media so that we can have these kind of discussions. We can have contrary discussions. We can be critical of the governments of the day. We can be critical of our leadership and not worry about being shut down. And that's the beauty, the last bastion of democracy, Andrew Christo used to call it, and I will agree with him wholeheartedly. And of course, after the open hour tomorrow, it's time for Science Files. Dr. Rob Thacker is here. Artemis is in the news again. Maybe we'll send Dr. Rob to the moon. I wondered if he'd go. I think I'd go. I think that'd be fun. Somebody's golfed on there already. I wonder if anybody's played, game of two-hand touch or played shinny. Maybe we need to bring the hockey sticks and the nets up there, right? Show them how Canadians do it. Anyway, Dr. Rob will be here tomorrow, and Artemis to the moon, and whatever science questions you have, he'll be here to answer all of those. My endearing thanks to Vanessa Vandenez on the other side of the glass. Folks, without her, we just can't do this show. She puts it together, and I'm hearing a rumor that we may have an Oscar winner joining the show here in the next couple of days. Ooh, did I say something I wasn't supposed to? I'm getting the look, that mom look. Anyway, make sure you stay tuned for that. Until then, everybody, as I mentioned, we live in a beautiful place. It is one of the most beautiful places in the world, and we are very lucky to be here. People spend thousands of dollars every year just to come here and see it, and it's right here in our backyard. It's St. Patrick's Day tomorrow. Make sure to wear the green, and make sure if you're consuming the green beer, that is, that you do so responsibly. And we look forward to hearing the après St. Patrick's Day stories, as those ones are usually more fun than the night themselves. Anyway, have a fantastic day, everybody. Get out there and touch some grass, and remember to be well, and it's important to be kind to one another.